Hello everyone, how are you? Hope all of you are well and safe at home. Today this class is for M2 and the topic is King Lear. Now look at the character map. The main character is King Lear, aging king and father, and the second character is Cordelia, Lear's loving youngest daughter, and Goneril, Lear's deceptive eldest daughter, and Edmund, Gloucester's deceptive buster and also forbidden lovers of Goneril, Regan, Lear's deceptive middle daughter and also forbidden lovers of Edmund. Edgar, Gloucester's legitimate son, and Earl of Gloucester is loyal and older nobleman of King Lear. So look at the color. The main character is in the deep purple and the rest of the character is minor character. Character analysis. Lear. Lear's basic flaw at the beginning of the play is that he values appearances above reality. He wants to be treated as a king and to enjoy the title, but he doesn't want to fulfill a king's obligations of governing for the good of his subjects. Similarly, his taste of his daughter demonstrates that he values a flattering public display of love over real love. He doesn't ask which of you doth love us most, but rather which of you shall we say doth love us most. Most readers conclude that Lear is simply blind to the truth, but Cordelia is already his favorite daughter at the beginning of the play, so presumably he knows that she loves him the most. Nevertheless, Lear values Goneril and Regan's fawning over Cordelia's sincere sense of filial duty. An important question to ask is whether Lear develops as a character, whether he learns from his mistakes and becomes a better and more insightful human being. In some ways, the answer is no. He doesn't completely recover his sanity and emerge as a better king, but his values do change over the course of the play, as he realizes his weakness and the insignificance in comparison to the awesome forces of the natural world. He becomes a humble and caring individual. He comes to cherish Cordelia above everything else and to place his own love for Cordelia above every other consideration, to the point that he would rather live in prison with her than rule as a king again. Now this is the summaries of King Lear. Strength is power. Responsible has a positive transformation. Weakness is separates his power and responsibility is betrayed. Now come to the character Cordelia. Cordelia's chief characteristics are devotion, kindness, beauty and honesty. Honesty to a fault, perhaps. She is contrasted throughout the play with Goneril and Regan, who are neither honest nor loving, and who manipulate their father for their own ends. By refusing to take part in Lear's love test at the beginning of the play, Cordelia establishes herself as a repository of virtue, and the obvious authenticity of her love for Lear makes clear the extent of King's error in banishing her. For most of the middle section of the play, she is off stage, but as we observe the depredations of Goneril and Regan and watch Lear's descent into madness, Cordelia is never far from the audience's thoughts, and her beauty is venerably described in religious terms. Indeed, rumors of her return to Britain begin to surface almost immediately, and once she lands at Dover, the action of the play begins to move toward her, and as all the characters converge on the coast. Cordelia's reunion with Lear marks the apparent restoration of order in the kingdom and the triumph of love and forgiveness over hatred and spite. This fleeting moment of family happiness makes the devastating finale of King Lear that much more cruel, as Cordelia, the personification of kindness and virtue, becomes a literal sacrifice to the heartlessness of an apparently unjust world. So, this is the summarization of the character Cordelia. Strength is honesty, integrity, low-key, principled. Weakness is not sure if tries, like or unrealistic. Now come to the character Edmund. Of all all the play's villains, Edmund is the most complex and sympathetic. He is a consummate schemer of a Machiavellian character, eager to seize any opportunity and willing to do anything to achieve his goals. However, his ambition is interesting insofar as it reflects not only a thirst for land and power, but also a desire for the recognition denied to him by his status as a bastard. His serial treachery is not merely self-interested. It is a conscious rebellion against the social order that has denied him the same status as Gloucester's legitimate son Edgar. Now gods, stand up for bastards. Edmund commands, but in fact he depends not on divine aid, but on his own initiative. He is the ultimate self-made man, and he is such a cold and capable villain that it is entertaining to watch him work. Much as the audience can appreciate the clever weakness of Iago in Othello, only at the close of the play does Edmund show a flicker of weakness. Mortally wounded, he says that both Goneril and Regan have died for him, and whispers yet Edmund was beloved. After this ambiguous statement, he seems to repent his villainy and admits to having ordered Cordelia's death. His peculiar change of heart, rare among Shakespearean villains, is enough to make the audience wonder and the carnage whether Edmund's villainy sprang not from some innate cruelty, but simply from a thought misdirected desire for the familial love that he witnessed around. So this is the summary of the character Edmund. Strength is a likable villain, has a soft side, weakness a jerk, but he is abused for being a bastard. Now come to the character Goneril and Regan. This is little good to be said for Lear's older daughters, who are largely indistinguishable in their villainy and spite. Goneril and Regan are clever, or at least clever enough to flatter their father in the play's opening scene, and early in the play their bad behavior toward Lear seems matched by his own pride and temper. But any sympathy that the audience can muster for them evaporates quickly. First, when they turn their father out into the storm at the end of the Act 2, and then when they viciously put out Gloucester's eyes in Act 3. Goneril and Regan are, in a sense, personifications of evil. They have no conscience, only appetite. It is this greedy ambition that enables them to crush all opposition and make themselves mistress of Britain. Ultimately, however, this same appetite brings about their undoing. Their desire for power is satisfied, but both harbor sexual desire for Edmund, which destroys their alliance and eventually leads them to destroy each other. Evil, the play suggests, inevitably turns in on itself. So this is the summary of the character Goneril. Strength is worried about father, justified to an extent. Weakness, ruthless. Extreme actions, selfish. And this is the summary of character Regan. Strength, worried about father, justified to an extent. Weakness, passive, doesn't stand up to her sister. Now come to the character Gloucester. Gloucester's story runs parallel to Lear's. Like Lear, Gloucester is introduced as a father who does not understand his children. He jokes about Edmund and calls him a whoreson when Edmund is standing right next to him. In his first soliloquy, Edmund reveals how much he resents the way his father treats him. While the audience understands that Gloucester shouldn't trust Edmund, Gloucester himself is blind to his son's true motivations. Just as Lear falls for Goneril and Regan's flattery, Gloucester falls for Edmund's deception. Lear banishes Cordelia, the daughter who loves him, and the Gloucester tries to execute Edgar, too, son who loves him. Both Lear and Gloucester end up homeless and wandering on the beach near Dover. The close similarity between Gloucester's story and Lear serves to underline that Lear's fate is not exceptional. In the bleak universe of King Lear, it's normal for old men to suffer at the hands of their own children to end up with nothing. The justness or unjustness of Gloucester's fate remains unclear. Edmund, who deliberately sets out to destroy Gloucester, claims that he is acting in the name of natural justice. Thou, nature, art my goddess. To thy law my services are bound. Before he blinds Gloucester, Cornwall admits that it is unjust to harm him without a proper trial. Edgar argues that Gloucester deserves to lose his eyes for fathering an illegitimate son. Gloucester himself comes to believe that the world is unjust and cruel. As flies the wanton boys are we to those guards, they kill us for their sport. Gloucester's blinding is one of the most violent and shocking scenes in any of Shakespeare's plays. But the fact that no two characters can agree if or why Gloucester deserves blinding suggests that the act is not only unjust but random and meaningless. This is the summary of Gloucester. Strength is gains insight about his case, weakness, emotionally blind, and eventually literally. Now come to the themes of King Lear. The first is justice. King Lear is a brutal play filled with human cruelty and awful, seemingly meaningless disasters. The play's succession of terrible events raises an obvious question for the characters, namely whether there is any possibility of justice in the world, or whether the world is fundamentally indifferent or even hostile to humankind. Various characters offer their opinions. As flies to wanton boys are we go to the gods. They kill us for their sport. Gloucester muses, realizing it foolish for humankind to that the natural world works in parallel with socially or morally convenient notions of justice. Edgar, on the other hand, insists that the gods are just, believing that individuals get what they deserve. But in the end, we are left with only a terrifying uncertainty. Although the wicked die, the good die along with them, culminating in that awful image of Lear cradling Cordelia's body in his arms. There is goodness in the world of the play, but there is also madness and death, and it is difficult to tell which triumphs in the end. Second theme is authority versus chaos. King Lear is about political authority as much as it is about family dynamics. Lear is not only a father but also a king, and when he gives away his authority to the unworthy and evil Goneril and Regan, he delivers not only himself and his family but all of Britain into chaos and cruelty. As the two wicked sisters indulge their appetite for power and Edmund begins his own accession, the kingdom descends into civil strife, and we realize that Lear has destroyed not only his own authority but all authority in Britain. The stable hierarchical order that Lear initially represents falls apart, and disorder engulfs the realm. The failure of authority in the face of chaos recurs in Lear's wanderings on the hearth during the storm. Witnessing the powerful forces of the natural world, Lear comes to understand that he, like the rest of the humankind, is insignificant in the world. This realization proves much more important than the realization of his loss of political control, as it compels him to reprioritize his values and become humble and caring. With this newfound understanding of himself, Lear hopes to be able to confront the chaos in the political realm as reconciliation. Darkness and unhappiness pervade King Lear, and the devastating Act 5 represents one of the most tragic endings in all of literature. Nevertheless, the play presents the central relationship between Lear and Cordelia as a dramatic embodiment of true, self-sacrificing love. Rather than despising Lear for banishing her, Cordelia remains devoted even from afar, eventually brings an army from a foreign country to rescue him from his tormentors. Lear, meanwhile, learns a tremendously cruel lesson in humility and eventually reaches the point where he can reunite joyfully with Cordelia and experience the warmth of her forgiving love. Lear's recognition of the error of his ways is an ingredient vital to reconciliation with Cordelia, not because Cordelia feels wronged by him, but because he has understood the sincerity and depth of her love for him. His maturation enables him to bring Cordelia back into his good graces, a testament to love's ability to flourish, even if fleetingly amid the horror and chaos that engulf the rest of the play. Nihilism. King Lear presents a bleak vision of a world without meaning. Lear begins the play valuing justice, the social order, and the value of kingship, but his values are undermined by his experiences. Lear ends up behaving that justice, order, and kingship are just flattering names for raw, brutal power. Cornwall confirms Lear's view when he admits that even though punishing Gloucester without a trial is unjust, his power gives him the freedom to act as he wants. Our power shall do a courtesy to our wrath. Gloucester too comes to see life as random, violent and cruel, claiming the gods treat people with the same level of care as schoolboys with flies. Nowhere does King Lear suggest life offers meaning or the possibility of redemption. The play's tragic ending offers no lesson. Cordelia dies for no reason. The order for her execution has been reversed. The few characters left alive express despair at what they have seen. Self-knowledge. King Lear shows that a lack of self-knowledge can cause chaos and tragedy, but the play also suggests that self-knowledge is painful and perhaps not worth the effort it takes to achieve it. Lear's tragic flaw is a lack of self-knowledge. His daughter Regan identifies this flaw in the play's opening scene. He hath ever but slenderly known himself. Lear achieves self-knowledge, but at the cost of his wealth, power, and sanity. That what he learns about himself is not a pleasantry discovery. I am a very foolish, fond old man. Achieving self-knowledge does not allow Lear to escape his tragic fate. In fact, self-knowledge makes his suffering worse. He realizes that his daughter Cordelia loves him after all, which only makes her death more painful. Edmund's story also suggests that self-knowledge is of limited value. Unlike Lear, Edmund sees himself clearly from the beginning of the play, but his self-knowledge doesn't do him much good. He dies before Lear does. The unreliability of speech. King Lear suggests that people's speeches and words are not always reliable and trustworthy. The tragic events of King Lear are set in motion because Lear believes the loving speeches Goneril and Regan make, even though they are obviously deceitful. Goneril claims her love makes speech unable, which is emptied of meaning because she is in the middle of a long speech. Kent argues that simple speech like Cordelia's is trustworthy, nor are those empty-hearted, whose low sounds reverb no hollowness. But Cornwall argues that simple speech can be just as unreliable as elaborate flattery. Edgar suggests that language can never reliably express suffering. At the end of the play, Lear's behavior suggests that Edgar is correct. When he finds his daughter Cordelia dead, Lear abandons languages altogether. Howl, howl, howl. At last, we can say that King Lear is a play about blindness to others' motivations, blindness to one's own true nature, blindness to the emptiness of power and privilege, and blindness to the importance of selfless love. Lear's only desire is to enjoy a comfortable, carefree old age, but he fails to see the role his absolute power has played in shaping his relationship with his daughters, whom he expects to take care of him. Once he loses his power, Lear gains insight into his own nature and realizes his shortcomings, admitting mine eyes are not of the best. Tragically, this self-knowledge comes to at late, at a point when Lear has forfeited the power that might have enabled him to change his fate. He finally sees the world as it really is, but is powerless to do anything about it. He dies after saying the final words, "Look, look there, a literal command that the others look at Cordelia, but also a symbolic plea that the survivors see themselves and the world more accurately. So today, up to this, thank you everyone.